And we're live and on the air. And this is the TWIS Minion Science Island Hangout. Ahmed Dyer from the great state of Connecticut. Instead of having not winter, we're having not spring. And also joining me is the man himself, Justin Jackson.
What's going on, Ed?
We got science going on. That's what we got going on. We got politics going on. We got all kinds of great news about what robots are going to do for us, including surgery. We got apps that are going to tell us how to do things like saving people. And we got water wars, but I don't know. And a couple of unfortunate political news stories that we can get to. So let us start off with robot surgery. What I'm going to say is, right off the bat, this is a supervised, autonomous robot surgeon. Okay? So the surgeons, the robot's working off an algorithm, but there's a doctor supervising, looking at it to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Who's really the wrong person to supervise a robot? Really, you want an engineer, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point.
The doctor's going to be able to tell if the procedure, I suppose, is proceeding appropriately.
They did a smart thing, though. They didn't start with a person. They started with a pig. So if they screw up the surgery, you got free bacon. All right. I'm going to try to screen share as I usually do.
Okay. And what type of surgery is this?
Well, there's a picture of it. This is, let's see, I will tell you. It says here, right in the story.
Soft tissue surgery.
Soft tissue surgery. And I have immediately picked up the wrong story.
So okay. This was a story I've often retold, but they were working on a robot in Neil Sharkey's orthopedics research lab at UC Davis in, oh gosh, what would that have been? Sometime in the very late 80s, as I was having a summer job there. And they were working on a chiseling robot that could more deftly chisel out the hip bone to insert a hip replacement, because it's the sort of thing that isn't really so much a doctoring skill that you're trained. It's more of like a sculptor type skill. So they were working on getting perfecting having a robot do this chiseling act. Chiseling, drilling, all the rest of it, grinding it out. And to success. This is something that's used in modern day for human hip replacements. Back then, they were using it on labs. They were actually, labs have, their hips degenerate. That's sort of how they begin to decline as they age. So they had people who were, wanted to try to give their dogs this hip replacement and were volunteering them for the scientific test. And it was successful, and it turned into a thing that now is routine for the robotic arm sculptor chiseling thing to be used in hip replacements. That's like a standard thing now.
Yeah, it would work well when you're talking about the area where they're going to operate is secure. Mm-hmm. It's not going to move.
Yeah.
And you're sure it's not going to move. And of course, you've done some kind of maybe now you could even do some sort of 3D modeling pre-surgery stuff. Mm-hmm. So you're really, really sure this is exactly how you want to do it.
Right.
And in that case, it sounds like this type of robot can do it. And it can even do the surgery, the stitching. Take care of the stitching as well. Yeah. The key being, I think you've got to be immobilized. There can't be any moving around, and you obviously can't have any surprises.
Yeah.
This is a study published, Science Transitional Medicine. These are the people at the Sheikh Syed Institute for Pediatric Surgical Innovation, Children's National Health System. Reports results of soft tissue, this is just soft tissue surgery, conducted on both inanimate porcine tissue and living pigs using proprietary robotic surgery technology. It says while robot-assisted surgery has increased in adoption in health settings, the execution of soft tissue surgery has remained entirely manual because it's unpredictable. Elastic and plastic changes in soft tissue that occur during surgery, so you got to have that surgeon making adjustments. Now, what they say is this STAR system uses a tracking system that integrates near-infrared fluorescent markers and 3D planoptic vision, which captures light field information to provide images of a scene in 3 dimensions. This system enables accurate, it says uninhibited tracking of tissue motion and change throughout the surgery. Tracking is combined with another innovation, they say, the intelligent algorithm that guides the surgery plan and autonomously makes adjustments to the plan in real time as the tissue moves. That's interesting. It also employs force sensing, sub-millimeter positioning, and actuated surgical tools. Bedside lightweight robot. They compared the effectiveness of this particular robot with surgeons performed by real live humans. And what they claim is this particular surgery was more successful. The comparison showed that supervised autonomous robotic procedures using STAR proved superior to surgery performed by an experienced surgeon. Yay! Whether or not, there's a lot of confidence in those surgeons. Whether on static porcine tissue or on living specimens in areas such as constant suture spacing. So there you go.
All right, robot doctors.
Yes,
Okay with that, I think I'm okay with the robot doctor. Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of doctors. I would say, okay, Doc, wait, bring in the robot. Robot.
I need somebody with a better bedside manner. Can you please bring me a robot?
Okay. Actually, this is even, the next 2 stories I think are even a little bit more exciting because you're talking about, this is really, every week it's a growing field of health apps. That help us through our smartphones and other devices monitor our own health, and in the second story, teaching or telling someone how to perform CPR. An untrained individual, you've got the guys lying there, he's dying, you can't wait for the medical professional, you don't have any training, so what you do is you use this app and it gives you instructions, and we'll show you how once I get to it. In fact, I'll jump into that one because that's interesting because you're getting instructions on how to do it. My hope is that you'll get a Siri-like voice along, maybe with a little picture. Put this over here. Put your mouth exactly over here. Push, pull, you know.
Just sort of picturing somebody standing over somebody who's dying and like going through the app and like, okay, push here. I understand. This isn't. Is that working? How about now?
It is called the Telephone Cardiopulmonary Resuscitation Program. What they say is it increased survival rates and favorable outcomes. I don't have a picture of it. Okay. outcomes for patients who experience an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. These are the people, University of Arizona Department of Emergency Medicine. And it's called bystander CPR, BCPR, has shown to double or even triple survival from out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. And despite decades of public CPR training, most communities, fewer than half of the individuals with cardiac arrest don't receive any cardiac arrest training. I didn't read that right. Let's see. Despite decades of CPR training in most communities, fewer than half of all individuals with cardiac arrest receive any of this bystander CPR. I did say it right. The lake survival rates persist. So the guys, go ahead.
They're gonna have to teach this in like high school or something, man.
Oh,
Like to get everybody to, maybe they already do. I don't know. It's been a while. But yeah, I think the important thing would be to get this app on there now, so you're not going looking for the Wi-Fi or the, downloading. What's my ID password again? Hang on, I'll find it. I know there's an app for this. Seems like it would be quicker just to Google it, find a Wikipedia example of the practice, and just do it that way. But an app, okay.
Let's see. In response, blah, 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 emphasize the importance of telecommunicators, 911 call takers and dispatchers, identifying a cardiac arrest and assisting lay rescuers. Now,
So
really,
there's another thing, calling 911 and having somebody walk you through it. That seems like that would be reasonably effective.
the whole key to this being more effective than waiting for the medical trained people to show up, it's got to happen quickly. Like you say, it's got to be one step, bang, like 911.
Yeah.
And then you get immediate help.
I think that would be my first step, would be 911. What do I do? There's somebody choking, or looks like they're having a heart attack, or they just got mauled by a Yeti. What is the procedure? What's my next few steps here?
And maybe at the 911 end, and they could have, I don't know, one button they can press that immediately gets you to like a Siri-like device that starts talking to you.
Could be, but I think those people are trained in this. The people at 911 are trained to talk you through these things.
Okay.
So I mean, not everything that you can make an app form necessarily makes it any easier now. There have been things you can do, but I think if you were somebody who was in charge of, say, a senior, like a bus full of seniors or kids or anybody, if anybody you're in charge of any number of people on a daily basis, that you're going to be encountering in the public, it might be a nice training tool to have this app and practice with your fellow lifeguard or whoever. But it's one of those things. It's like we don't really think about it or train on it because it's such a rare thing that any of us will encounter it. And that's probably why we don't. But it might be a fun training tool. Like, instead of the next meeting at work where we're going to talk about, the quality of the cleanliness of the office on Friday evening, let's make it a little easier for the cleanup crew, or whatever the horrible, awful weekly work meeting normally is. Somebody could bring this app and make that the meeting, and everybody sort of go over if this happened. That would be a nice little safety meeting.
Yeah, I talked to Dale maybe a month ago, was here, and he mentioned like in Canada, it's almost mandatory. All businesses, people go through this training. They have the paddles and things. Every business has these paddles that you can get to that resuscitate your heart?
Oh my gosh, that would be so tempting just to play with that at work. Okay. I'm next. All right. Get me.
The new high.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Can you imagine that? They put that in college campuses, fraternities. Can you imagine?
It's all over. Yeah. Then we'd really find out who has a weak heart, right?
Yeah.
Causing cardiac arrest. Perfectly healthy people across the country.
Oh boy. Oh, it really should be mandatory, just like you saying. You got to get the training.
Yeah.
It's really hard if you're relying on. Okay, wait a second. The connection's getting bad. Wait a second. What'd you say, Siri? What'd you say?
Yeah, and I think it's probably high school might be the wrong time to teach it. Maybe you do train, like have a mandatory school for 40-year-olds. Okay, you're coming to the age you're going to be around more people who are likely to drop down from a heart attack. So this is now mandatory training at age 40. You have to go and learn how to do this.
Yeah, Hot Rod in the chat room. I don't know if he's talking about robotic surgery, but he says he doesn't think so. He's not buying into the whole robotic surgery deal. So, all right. The next thing we're going to talk about is measuring lung capacity. Let's see. Okay. Make sure I got the right story here. That's the wrong story. Okay, guys. Back up. Here we go. That's the sucker I want to talk about. And we have an actual picture of the device.
It's it's not even a smartphone.
Yes.
What is that?
Let's see. It's designed to work on any kind of phone, not just smartphones. That's exactly. They wanted to make sure this can work in just about anything.
Okay.
Let's see. Who are these people? This is a conference in San Jose, and it's called the Spiral Call. That's the name of the device. And it says it came within 6.2% of results from clinical spirometers used in hospitals and doctors, meaning it meets the medical community standards for accuracy. Wanted to make sure that they could measure lung function on any type of phone you might encounter in the world. Smartphone, dumb phones, landlines, payphones.
Yeah, doesn't matter. Just dial this number and yell for as long as you possibly can. And on until it's okay. You're right. You're fine.
That's basically how it works.
Really?
You say with Spiral Call, you call an 800 number below the phone and use the telephone network to test your lung. The patients take a deep breath in, exhale as hard and fast as they can, although they can't exhale anymore. And that's into their smartphones. Mm-hmm. The phone's microphone senses sound and pressure from that exhalation and sends the data to a central receiver, which uses machine learning algorithms to convert the data into standard measurements of lung function. Good to people who need to manage chronic lung disease for their entire lives. Real need for a device that allows patients to accurately monitor their condition at home without constantly going to the doctor. In the last 4 years, they collected data from more than 4,000 patients in some clinics in Seattle and India, where the clinicians have measured lung functions using both SpiroSmart and commercial spirometer. The comparative data has improved the performance of the machine learning algorithms and laid the groundwork for FDA clearance, clearance process. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Let us see. The next thing we're going, I got a couple of environmentals. Well, those are pretty quick. I'm going to go to the environmental stories. And this one, I saw a video related to this story. And you've got a picture of a community in India. And they've got their water supply, and they have their people in the community guarding their water 24 hours a day, walking around with rifles and things because they're worried about people stealing their water. This is not going to be uncommon. And let me see if I can screen share something here. Oh, this is in Scientific America. That's a pretty. That's what our water supplies are going to look like pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an article. I'm only going to read a couple of paragraphs. Water impacts reverberate far beyond the community. Water shocks often emerge as threat multipliers. Drought is often associated with migration and regime change. And this is according to Carl Baruch. He's Director of International Programs at the Environmental Law Institute. One thing we found in context of water security and climate change, it really comes down to institutions and governance. Changes in water availability, timing and temperature, they're the stressors. And how well a country or community copes with these stressors depends substantially, they say, on governance. In broad terms, a country's ability to equitably allocate water and resolve disputes peacefully can mean survival and peace for its people. That's key, resolving disputes peacefully. On the flip side, if individuals use water scarcity as an opportunity to consolidate political power or accuse others for stealing water, guess what? We got war. Mm-hmm. Now, it says in this particular region where you see that picture, the SACHEL in the Sudan, in places like the Sudan, where refugee camps have sprung up and morphed into populous, semi-permanent cities housing thousands of people, water is being drained at an unsustainable level. Many of these encampments rely on limited sources like fossil aquifers, bringing their long-term viability into question. Last paragraph I'll read was kind of a stunner to me. Countries like Pakistan can only store about 30 days worth of water, and that's hugely inadequate when you look at climate change. 30 days worth of water?
That's pretty frightening.
That is frightening.
Yeah. So obviously it's going to be really hard for us to relate to thinking about water as a limited resource. In the United States, water is abundant. If anything, we have at times way too much of it in some places, right? But we also have long settled English law that predates this country. That is the basis of most of our water usage and rights. We have a system of law that we inherited from a nation that was a stable system. I'll say a stable legal system that predated this country. We didn't make up our ways of dealing with who can use and who can not use this, that, and the other water. And we've improved that over the years too. We've created it a more complex, intricate layers of regulation on this. But But the laws in the United States are pretty strict about who can use water and how much you can divert, or if you can at all divert, even if your property that you own is on a river or lake. It doesn't give you the rights to just use the water. Yeah, you may be able to, in some cases of streams and like, do some diversion, but it has to also not impact as the water leaves your property. It can't be diminishing the amount of water, for instance, that goes on to the next property. So a lot of our what could be fighting over water of streams or rivers getting diverted. You know, you could picture the Mississippi River not making it all the way out to the Gulf if, you know, Louisiana decided, or not Louisiana, but if Illinois decided, we're going to keep all the water from Mississippi flowing. We're just going to hang on to it and not let any of it go downstream. Like, it'd be insane to even think of this. So I think a part of it has to do with probably these are regions that didn't have or develop a legal framework for handling water. And that's why, you know, it's not like water scarcity changes from some states to other states during presidential elections, because it doesn't matter. But in a regime change where the entire rule of law is now open to interpretation or reinterpretation or null and void in certain areas of the world, I can see this starting from scratch. You have, once again, we have no legal framework. We've done a little of that in this country. For instance, Nevada didn't used to border the Colorado River. It had no contact with it, and I think neither did California initially. But if you've ever seen the state of Nevada, at the bottom of it, it goes way down to this point, right? Like, why is all this? It's surrounded by these little square states to the east of it, and all of a sudden Nevada's there, and it's kind of square at the top, and then all of a sudden it diverts way down south to a little point, like a funnel, and that funnel is leading it right to the Colorado River. So it touches and therefore has rights to utilize some of the Colorado River, and that dip was created because I believe it was Arizona sided with the Confederacy, and so at losing the Civil War, they said, "Well, Nevada, we're going to give them a little access to that Colorado, and we're going to take it out of Arizona." That's how we're going to do it. We're going to give a little bit of Arizona to a different state. So there are some sort of consequences for upheavals and political changes, even in this country, when it comes to water. Certainly, you can look at the political strength of a city like Los Angeles in diverting what were lakes and small town communities that were built up around these lakes, and they're gone. Those lakes are gone, and they've been completely diverted, and the rainfall that falls in that area diverts to Los Angeles, and they've devoured a number of lakes in doing so. I want to say it's the Owens Valley, but I might be wrong about that. It's one of the areas where water was diverted to feed a growing population. So politics do come into play here too. Certainly California and all the talk about drought, which we've talked about here too. A lot of that has to do with the massive increase in farming and in types of farming that require a lot of water that have grown exponentially in the last decade. More so than the population, and uses, the commercial from farming to just regular commercial uses like 90% or 88% of the water in the state of California. Residential usage is 10 to 12, and yet the public messages are, don't water your lawn, don't take a bath, don't wash your car. Don't use you're wasting too much water, oh citizens of California, when it's not really having that much of an impact. It's really the policies that have allowed growth in sectors that have heavy demand on water. And then we export the outcome. We export Almonds is the one I've talked about before, where something like 20. It's one of the highest water usage crops you can do. It's one of the biggest growth sectors in California, and it's something like 20-30% of that gets exported. To I think just 20% I think just goes to China, something like this. So now what are you talking about? Now you're exporting a product that is derived by the resource of water. So it's like you're exporting water, and then you're saying it's a drought, and then it's affecting the local people that way. And there's also been some really horrible stories about privatization of water sources. This is something that's gone on a few times in South America. I think the Bush family actually owned a private water company at some point, and I don't know if it was Ecuador or wherever it is that they hang out. But this also came up in Venezuela before Hugo. Was it Hugo? Who's the Venezuelan guy?
Hugo Sanchez was the
No.
old guy.
That's not. No, that's
No.
that's not the guy, is it? Not,
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking Hugo Chavez, but this is the wrong. That's not. No. Anyway,
We're talking about Venezuela.
and in Venezuela, but why is I'm going totally blank. Anyway, there was already an effort there to privatize water, so that even if you were getting water, if the locals were getting water from the same source they'd already gotten it, it had been corporatized. Somebody had paid for it, bought it, and now they were being asked to pay for that water that they'd been using for generations. Privatization of water is something that they've been trying out in third world countries. It's not something that would go great here, but look what goes on here. Bottled water is for sale in every grocery store. It uses an entire aisle now. People are constantly, you go to office buildings and they've got those water jugs that get delivered with regularity. So we're getting used to the idea of paying commercially for water.
Where politics comes into it, and I'm thinking, you said I think of Las Vegas. Las Vegas was one of the fastest growing cities in the country at one point. Mm-hmm. Now, I think Las Vegas imports all its water.
Yes.
And you've got a drought. So logically,
they don't have a drought. There was never water there to begin with.
Yeah.
There was never any water there to begin with. You can't call it a drought if there was never any water there to begin with.
Yeah, so we may be reaching the point where you've got to say, okay, Las Vegas, you can't grow. No, I'm going to guess the people in Las Vegas are not stupid. I don't think. Well, the gamblers, I'm not so sure about. And then maybe they're going to gamble that some miracle is going to happen and they're going to get water. But they got to know the city can't grow anymore. It doesn't have enough water to sustain itself now. Particularly when you get all those other states and cities are going to start coming in. So you should have some control over development so that in places where you're getting a water supply problem, you don't allow a lot of an increase in the population. Mm-hmm. That doesn't go over too well in the United States, though.
Right, because it didn't need to at one point. Like if you fly over Phoenix, which is also Phoenix, Arizona, is in the desert. If you fly over Las Vegas, which is in the desert. These are high growth communities. And they're hot areas. I mean, Phoenix can be 118, no problem. Fly over. It's amazing how there's a swimming pool in every backyard. And you understand why it's so freaking hot. Everybody wants to go for a swim. It is Hugo Chavez, who I was thinking of. Before he came into power, one of the things that he dismantled when they came into the power was the building blocks of a privatized water system that was showing up. And he nationalized.
Justin, Hot Rod, I think it was in the chat room, suggested Juan Valdez, but I don't think that's the guy.
No, that's who I buy my coffee from and my marijuana. So yeah, but it's all well and fine. Exploitation of resources or That's the Colorado River. When you're talking about Las Vegas, when you're talking about Phoenix, Arizona, you're talking about using the Colorado River, right? And it also ends up in Los Angeles. So then the real argument, and it's a political argument, and there's laws and everything else that's being applied to, is who gets to use it. I mean, Las Vegas doesn't exist without, remember, that big funnel drop down, and the only reason so it could funnel water out, and that's what fed Las Vegas. And without that post-Civil War dip in the bottom of the state's lines, never would have had access to that water. So the states have to argue now over who can use how much of the Colorado River at any given time. Whereas it was Los Angeles was sort of the first there, so maybe they're grandfathered in to whatever rate they're getting it at. But then as these other communities grow and they want a larger and larger share, the Colorado River begins to disappear, and the Hoover Dam may not, look that impressive when it's holding back a puddle, not a massive quantity of water. So, and then we see like issues with water safety and infrastructure in places like Flint, Michigan, which is just one example, but it's the most popular one out there. But in terms of people having to take arms and be on vigilant watch of a particular drinking hole or well is pretty unthinkable in the United States. We literally like a third or more of this state is coated in ice most of the year. The great flyover states are frozen tundras through the winter. If we really got serious about collecting, storing, and maintaining a water supply that we could somehow nationalize, that's how you would do it. I mean, you'd create the pipeline not for oil but for water. We could just import it from Canada. The United States literally isn't going to face the same issue as countries who are much like Las Vegas or Phoenix that have had growth within a desert, because they're not legally and socially connected to the countries near them or adjacent to them or adjacent to the adjacent, where there's plenty of water which could be brought in, piped in, aquifered in, anything else. So then if California needs to borrow water from Washington, right? There's an infrastructure there that would make sense for them to try to do a massive project that would somehow export Washington state water down to California, or Colorado could maybe help out Nevada, or Canada. Okay, we could create this giant keystone pipeline of water if it really came down to it. Much more difficult when you're talking about having 4 or 5 countries between you and that water source, and countries that you may have a tense history with. It's not likely. I mean, it's much more likely that, as you say, or as the article I suppose suggests, that war could come of this. What are you going to do if your country's cut off of of water or food or any sort of resource? It's almost as if like a country ran out of air, right? I mean, this is an essential life thing that all life forms require. If all of a sudden, Uzbekistan was, 30 days away from running out of oxygen to breathe for its people, damn right those people would have to find a way to get it. And out of desperation and not getting anywhere with negotiations, well, they would either negotiate a really horrible deal for themselves that would subject a lot of their citizens probably to horrible wage conditions or something of that nature, or they'd say, no, you know what, we're going to go to war. We're going to go fight you for it instead. So it's going to be a bad deal. Places with oil seem not to have a lot of water. A lot of these places, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is not really wet, and they can spend a ton of money desalinizing and doing all that sort of thing nowadays. But if the oil wells run dry or the price plummets because first worlds go to greener resources, that's another place that's going to be a hotbed of desperate people seeking to breathe air.
What adds to it is in where you have refugees, countries that are fleeing into a neighboring country, and that neighboring country doesn't have enough of its own water.
Right. And especially now, I mean, and then the refugee situation is, you're incredibly difficult. I mean, the population in this town here is like 80,000. And well, this is a bad example because there's like rivers over here, there's rivers there, there's like water everywhere in Northern California. It's ridiculous. So it wouldn't really be a water resource issue. So we have to first worldize the problem. Just to maybe conceive of it properly and say that there's 80,000 people here, and 80,000 more people showed up tomorrow, all with cars, right? And they all came to this town. And now there's 80,000 more cars parked in town. And now how hard is it to park anywhere, right? How hard is it to find any place you're afraid to unpark your car from your driveway for fear that you would come home and somebody's used your parking spot and it would be gone and you'd have to circle around for days looking for some place. I mean, anytime you have an unexpected population that overwhelms an infrastructure, everything is going to fail. You know, our infrastructure grows sometimes predictably. You know, you put in you're going to create a new expansion of your town. You put new development in. You know, there's going to be 5,000 new homes going in. So you before that thing is built, you improve the sewer, you widen a few streets, you add a couple stoplights where you didn't think you needed them before. And once that place is populated, the infrastructure was predicted and therefore in place and ready for them. Sometimes it's unpredicted. The town grows larger, and then it turns out this becomes the sort of economic center as this building goes up, and this is having a much bigger attraction than expected. And after the people are already there, you're trying to widen streets and improve sewers. And that's tougher, but it still gets done. But when you have something that happens that quick, like an influx of 200,000 refugees, there's no time, no predictive, and no really reactive way to fix infrastructure quick enough to accommodate people, and it can overwhelm a society.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I've got another environmental story. Now, you know, we got this problem, right? We got too much carbon. Carbon's spewing out in the atmosphere, and we got to sequester carbon. A good place, trees and forests, sequester carbon. Okay, now you know what you need, and this is a study, Duke University, and from Duke, this is Anna Boris, who's an environmental engineer, and what you need where you got forest is more hurricanes. All right, my screen share. Whoops, didn't get to the story. Okay, let me go to, there we go. Okay, I probably got a picture of a bunch of trees or something. Oh, there we go. We got a graph. Okay. In a new study, she revealed the increase in forest photosynthesis and growth made possible by tropical cyclones in the southeastern United States captures 300 times more carbon than is released by all the vehicles in the U.S. Our study showed that while hurricanes can cause little things like, you know, flooding, destroy city infrastructure, there's two sides to the story, as there always is. The other side is that hurricanes recharge the aquifers and have an enormous impact on photosynthesis, taking up carbon from the atmosphere. The study was done. She was a doctor by Lauren Lohman. She was a doctoral student, and she could computer model. She created a computer model to simulate the ecological impacts of tropical cyclones for the period of 2004 to 2007. Earlier years of the time period had a high number of tropical cyclones. Landfall events, while the later years had very few. Comparing these disparate years to simulations with the year without tropical cyclone events, she calculated the effect tropical cyclone rates have on photosynthesis and carbon intake. And what they claim is it's difficult.
Knocking down trees, right?
Knocking down trees, not really. You want to have the tree, not you want to have the trees.
Well, no, because if you knock down like old growth, you open up, you remove that canopy that was shading the under, and then new growth comes, and that's probably taking up carbon at a much greater rate because it's fresh growth, it's rapid growth. My guess, anyway. I don't know. You tell the story.
I'm going to guess that would certainly work when you're talking about solar energy. Mm-hmm. But a problem is we're knocking down our forest in many areas, and they're great carbon capturing machines.
But what I mean by that is if you knock down if a hurricane comes through, it gets rid of leaves, it knocks down old trees. They might be dead trees in its wake, and you've got the tree there to rot and to feed the other plants in there. The canopy, now there's more sunshine, it goes down. There may have been seeds that would have been seedlings, but they're in the shade all the time. Now these things grow, and as they're growing, their consumption and use may be more rapid than an older tree. And so all of this new foliage that's coming about might have some. That was my prediction, at least for this story, is that might be the reason why a hurricane or a cyclone passing through a forest could generate greater carbon capture.
I think their guess, and I think their guess is that it just simulates the trees to absorb more carbon, but that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I think and it could even be.
You got to get the water on the ground, and the trees absorb the water. So it's got to be absorbing water in the ground. The bigger the tree is, the more water it can absorb.
So there's okay, so I can see that. Maybe it's some sort of hybrid of the two. Maybe it didn't knock down a bunch of trees. Maybe it just knocked down a bunch of leaves, and that allowed more sunlight into the canopy. I don't know. And then that tree regrows those leaves. But I have a feeling that during those that growth portion, there's a greater carbon capture. I don't know why I'm thinking this. Might be wrong. I feel like I've heard this in some other study before. Maybe I'm wrong.
One important thing is the rate at which the water gets absorbed into the ground. I think carbon, taking in carbon. Okay, you're taking in the carbon. No, that's got to be the bigger the tree, the more carbon it can take in. The leaves themselves, I guess, you're right. The leaves are absorbing the carbon. The more leaves there are, the more carbon the tree is going to absorb. That's true. You're right there.
I'm mostly thinking about the growth cycle as being, I suppose that's more nitrogen than carbon. But I sort of see that the growth portion of it as being the one that's going to do the more generating. Once the tree's established, it may not need to absorb as much. And the fresh new leaves and growth and sprouting plants. I don't know. For some reason, I see that as a more active process than a tree that might be well established. Could be wrong.
They talked about photosynthesis, but they really don't go into detail on the story.
But the photosynthesis is this process too, where carbons are coming out of the atmosphere in the leaves, and oxygen's escaping again. So it seems in the higher photosynthesis situation, which might be younger growth.
Well, if you
Too bad they
have
don't
an
tell us the
area, you've
answer.
got trees.
Too
Well,
bad
let
that
me give
study.
you
Too
this,
bad
the
they did this
leaves.
study, but didn't give us the answer to the question. Or maybe I'm thankful that they didn't.
I don't know. Okay, now I picked out this story because we have our friend in the chat room, Jay. He's studying psychology. Now, this is a psychology study here. Very short story. I'm going to have to read it. Kind of makes my head hurt. But maybe you can figure out what's happening. And maybe Jay in the chat room can help us out a bit here. But it says, our minds may be rewriting history. This is Adam Baer, PhD student at the Department of Psychology. And they performed a couple of experiments on how to test how we experience choice. In one experiment, participants were told that 5 white circles would appear on the computer screen in front of them in rapid fire sequence. 1 would turn red. They were asked to predict which one would turn red and mentally note that. After a circle turned red, participants then recorded by a keystroke whether they had chosen correctly and had chosen incorrectly, or they had not had enough time to complete their choice. Okay. The circle red was selected randomly. So probability dictates that the participants would predict the correct circle 20% of the time. But when they only had a fraction of a second to make a prediction, these participants were likely to report they correctly predicted which circle would change color more than 20% of the time. In contrast, when participants had more time to make their guess, the reported number of accurate predictions dropped back to the expected level of 20%, suggesting that participants weren't simply lying about their accuracy to experimenters. Here's what they said. Here's what the researchers said. Mr. Baer said, the events were rearranged in subjects' mind. People subconsciously perceived the color red before they predicted it would appear, but consciously experienced these two things in the opposite order. The conscious experience of choice may be constructed after the fact, even when it feels like it is the cause of our behavior. Baer said it is unknown whether this illusion was caused by a quirk in perception processing, but that it could be reproduced, that it can only be reproduced in a lab, or whether it might have far more pervasive effects on our everyday lives and sense of free will. You got any clue about this?
Well, I guess the first thing I thought of in this, and it's interesting, they're not really giving them enough time to choose a number, right? So you're gonna pick 1 to 5, but now you're already, as soon as you're like, okay, I got to choose it, and it's going, and so then you're trying. But I don't know if the brain is coming up with a random number, right? If you're trying to think of a random number, and it's not a random number, but it's all right, I got to pick a number between 1 and 5. Now I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? I'm thinking of all the numbers that I have to choose from. Right? And if I'm now I'm being faced with a choice. It was 3. Well, I was thinking 3. I was thinking 3. I was also thinking 2, 4, 5, and 1. Like I was thinking all of those numbers at the same time because I'm laying out my choices in my head. And then the thing started, and maybe before I even picked it, and then I'm like, which one was it? Well, it was 3. I was thinking 3.
Maybe seeing it reinforces what you were one of your choices. So I guess what it says, what I would the takeaway is, I get that it's retroactively you made this choice, but retroactively looking back, the number that reality produced was one of your choices. Like if they said pick a number between 1 and 5, and I'm going to predict which number it is, except the experiment already happened. And it was 9, right? The experiment showed a 9. I wouldn't feel like I got that, right? Because that wasn't one of the numbers I was perhaps putting out in front of my options of things I have to choose from. You got to lay out those 5 options: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, red, green, blue, yellow, whatever the scenario is. So the fact that reality matches a preconceived notion of what it could be, I think may help reinforce the idea that you chose it. So you're experiencing it after the fact, yes, but it's not wholly invented because you had this. You had to. That was one of the options that you had in front of you. So
yeah, the subconscious mind and memory it's weird.
Well, I think also it's not
Interesting.
just that, but if not given enough time to really have chosen properly, I don't think when somebody says, okay, I have to choose between 1 through 5, so that's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I'll go with 3, and that will be my final answer. Without giving that time, when you're choosing 1 through 5, all of those 1 through 5 are right there, right? You don't have to go through the list slow hand in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you say 5, all 5 are there. 1 is there, 2 is there, 3 is there, 4 is there, 5. They're all right there when you say 5. That's what I mean by the sort of
your memory
part of your brain did pick 3, right? Or did think of 3 before it was reinforced by 3. Now there's a connection there. The answer was 3, and you were thinking 3. You were also thinking the other numbers, but they're not reinforced because the answer that you got reinforced by 3. It's like a blues refrain. You know? They say the same thing twice because it seems truer when you say something twice, you know? And then you say something else that rhymes with it, and that makes the first 2 statements even more solid because now it's not only the same thing twice, which was reinforcing, but the last thing rhymed with those 2 reinforced, so they're connected now backwards through time. Makes perfect sense. I think it's a solid
if you can't remember whether you got it right or wrong, your memory says, well, you must have got it right.
Well, I think it's more than just the kind Jewish mother said, I'm sure you got it. Don't worry about it. Of course, you're so brilliant. Of course you got it right. I don't think it's just that sort of reinforcement. I really think it's because the brain is thinking multiple things at one time. And so, when you look back at choices that you made, it's not like the one decision you made. It's not like you only made one decision to make a choice. You probably had several decisions, but then you made one. It's sort of like predicting a number too. You sort of think it. Pick a number between 1 and 10. 7. The number was 3. Oh, it was also I was gonna say 3. You ever hear somebody say that? I was gonna say whatever it is, right? It's because the brain was gonna say it, but it was also gonna say 7. But it was also going to probably say 6 and 5 and 4 and 2 and 8 and 9 and 1. It was going to say all of them, really, because all of those were there at the same time, ready to be spoken.
Hot Rod's giving us a countdown to the SpaceX launch in the chat room. It's supposed to be a go in 20 minutes. All right.
Which reminds me, Ed, I've got to suit up. I've only got 20 minutes to get into my expecting a ride any minute. Actually,
right any minute now.
I might have more. I think I've got 20 minutes in like a couple of days or something. I might have a little bit more time.
Okay, I picked this next story because I thought Pamela was going to be here, but she's apparently too busy tonight. Okay, now this has to do with um, uh, boys and men having a greater interest and participating more in sports than girls and women. Um, they had some interesting hypotheses. Let's see, the authors explored adaptive functional hypothesis for sports. These are accounts of why humans would evolve dispositions to be interested in sports, particularly how such dispositions could affect the likelihood of survival and reproduction. Two hypotheses seem relevant for both males and females. One hypothesis focuses on the importance of needing an ally. You need a coalition in between group contexts. The other emphasizes the need to develop social and motor skills. Another hypothesis holds that individuals compete in sports to gain status, and that non-participant monitoring sports performance so they can evaluate potential competitors and allies, the guys showing off and the ladies looking at see which guys are the fittest. The evidence indicates that this hypothesis chiefly to males. Now you got a fourth hypothesis is that sports serves as courtship displays that advertise participant quality to the opposite sex. This hypothesis effectively explains some aspects of females' sports interest. Now, the gist of the whole thing is, my contention is where women, in those it's a cultural thing. I see it as more of a cultural thing, and I don't really see it as an evolutionary biological thing.
I see it as a legal thing. I see it as Title IX. This is classic Title IX. Before, no women were doing sports in school. There were very few, professional female athletes of any note. Then Title IX, which sort of, I think it was in the year of my birth. So about 43 years ago. Title IX goes into effect saying it's basically discrimination for there to be all these athletic programs in schools for boys, but none for the girls, and that you had to create equal opportunities in athletics in school. And then you flash forward 20 and 30 years, and the women take home more gold medals than the men in the Olympics. And why is that? Title IX, baby. Stop discriminating against people. I kind of love the idea that sports is about courts. What do you call it? Courtship.
Courtship.
Courtship. Because that means I've been in bars full of testosterone-filled men who are just totally in love with their favorite professional athlete. I think the competitive nature aspect of it runs deeply in at least American men and women. Probably it's I'm sure a global thing, but it's certainly allowed to be expressed here in the United States to be competitive. It's part of the sort of capitalist verve. So I think societally, it's something where people like to win. But there's also, there's sporting events with great stories of when in the course of a football game, there's a team that's always down and fighting back. And sometimes they overcome the team that was dominant and sometimes they don't. And sometimes the team that was dominating lets everything slip through their fingers by
by not keeping it together or whatever. But I don't know. I think there's the idea that there's different interests in sports. I'll say I think a lot of that can be looked at through the sort of lens of gender and racial identity. I mean, one of the biggest sports in Denmark that I can recall, where I was at, they're big into soccer, but they're also big into handball. And when I was there, their women's handball team had a superstar, Anja Andersen. And Anja Andersen was just amazing. I mean, she's doing, and if you don't know what handball is, don't worry. It's not the one where you bounce against the wall. It's like somewhere between soccer and basketball. They've got like soccer nets. It's played indoors. It's a smaller ball than a soccer ball, but they can throw it to each other. They can dribble a couple times. But Anya's doing like these amazing, like behind the back, no look passes, getting it back, diving and doing this crazy throws to get the goals. Fantastic. Everybody loves the sports, but I could see the handball sport, at least in that era of Danish dominance of the sport, being huge among the female population. Why? There's a role model that it can sort of identify with. It's somewhat of a stereotype that black people tend to like basketball, but there's a reason for this, which is this is one of the most heavily racially integrated sports that we had in the United States. I mean, everybody talks about the racial barrier broken by Jackie Robinson and that sort of thing, but basketball was heavily integrated quicker than any other sport in the United States. And
let me interrupt you briefly.
Generations.
Bill Russell, a story by Bill Russell. He played back, I guess it was in high school, maybe the 50s. And the white school against the black school, predominantly black school. The coach of the white team would not let his players try a jump shot. They had to try the old two-handed set. And the kids are saying, yeah, okay, let's do the old jump shot. The coach, no, that's not how white people play basketball.
Well, no, and the pep talk before that big game too. As I recall, I've seen some archive footage of the coach of the African American team. Like their team was scared to go out there and take the court. They were terrified. Like, how we're black, we're African Americans. How we don't know anything about basketball. And the coach is like, "You black people, there's a bunch of white people out there. I'm going to take a jump shot. You got this. Trust me. Just go out there and half-ass it. You'll win." But the moral of the story is, but I think that's I mean, certainly when I was growing up, that was huge. Well, I mean, growing up in a black neighborhood, that was huge. Basketball was a big influence. We'd go and shoot hoops and stuff, and everybody had their favorite NBA star who was also black. And then I was like, who's the white guy? Is it, Stephen Kerr? What do I get to be? I don't really know that. But I think it has to do with having a mentor and a role model in the sport that you can identify as like you in some way early on, at least as a kid, maybe, or at least before we get beyond that. I mean, I don't think, I had I've had any favorite white basketball or players. I certainly never had a favorite Irish, Italian, Jewish, Native American basketball player. That never came up. But I mean, not having a race a racial makeup that's shared by that many people, I've never really been able to follow the pure stereotype there. But I get why like men and women would have different interests, and especially women would have perhaps more segmented sports interests in that it's Title IX. We're talking 1972. So where does that put us in sports? When did basketball has been major for sport, or football's like on Super Bowl 50 or 60.
You know,
I don't even know. Like these sports have
if
been
you
around
think
for a long time.
basketball being popular, the first time I think of is the Boston Celtics. And it had Bill Russell.
Okay. So this is, what year is this? 70, early 70s, right?
Probably, I have no idea.
Okay, so this is like the early 70s. So this is when Title IX, this is when the high school girls finally get to have a basketball team. You know what I mean? This is when it becomes forced upon schools nationwide to give girls the ability to participate in sports. And so now, we feel like all of time has taken place since then. Well, okay, so who are the professional athletes then? The first 10 years of this, we're talking into the 80s, a few athletes that come out. But we don't even have like a women's basketball league for them to go to after college, right? We have to have this at the colleges now. These are programs that are just getting created. And, they're laughable because
You used to have different rules. Women's basketball had different rules.
Right, and
You couldn't go past half court. You couldn't dribble the ball past half court. You get to half court, you had to pass to somebody else.
That's ridiculous, right? And then some of this too is then it's like, so it was laughable because how do you fill Title IX at a college level with people who never had sports in high school and elementary school, right? It's gonna look awful, and it probably looked awful for a while. And then there was no professional sport to go to after. So even how much, time do you really want to invest in this sport if there isn't a professional level for you to compete at after? And we're still there to an extent.
Yeah, I can think of, I say it's cultural, and it's Title IX. You're exactly right. That was almost a revolution, allowing women to go into collegiate sports. And the University of Connecticut. The University of Connecticut never really was very successful in anything. Then the men's team came along, Jim Calhoun. They won a national championship. Title 19, okay. Now the women's team, okay, you got a guy named Junio Amarero, I can't pronounce his name, super salesman. All the best girl basketball players in high school, most of them come to the University of Connecticut. Now you compare the success of the men's team versus the success of the women's team. They've won like 4 or 5 NCAA titles, like 9 out of the last 10. They've had like a 78 game winning streak, then another 45 game winning streak. They're the most successful team probably in college history. Who goes on television? Men's basketball team.
Right. Well, and then what is it? FIFA has a men's and a women's league, right? There's female soccer, but they don't get to play on necessarily the best fields. They don't get the big sellout crowds. But again, part of this, I think, one of the things you have to look at is so a lot of these NBA players in the 70s were probably children of athletes who competed. Maybe they were college players or whatever it was, right? So then you're talking, they were in college in the 50s and played basketball in the 50s to encourage their kids to play. Now they play. Now it's into the mid 70s, and there's a professional team that they're actually good enough to play on after, what was just this athletics thing that we do in our family. So what generation do we have to get to where we've instilled that in a female population, where there is that sort of history behind athleticism and sport? And I think we're getting there. I think in the last Olympics, our women won more gold than the men, and maybe we're a pretty big part of the reason we were successful in our last Olympics. And so you have to say, well, does that happen without Title IX? And the answer is probably no. The answer is probably not a chance.
So and I've seen some, for some reason there was what was it, the Sacramento Surge, I want to say, which was, I think that's what they were called. They were an minor league all women football team. So there's been attempts to do women's football that I haven't really seen. I haven't at least gotten word of it's going that far. Women's basketball is is not going to be as popular now as men's basketball. I kind of think in some of these it would be nice to be able to see a female athlete at the level of playing in the NBA, playing in professional football, and playing baseball. The fact that we haven't seen that somewhat surprises me, but in a way, it would also sort of be a betrayal of the system that they came up in. Now, that's sort of like saying Jackie Robinson leaving the Negro League was, turning his back on the league that made him, the league that he was, made famous in, or he had found success in. And so if the top female athletes go off to play with the boys, does that diminish the attraction and the lure and the prominence and the ticket sales ability of female sports? And it really could, but I don't know. It's a good question I posed to myself that I don't know the answer to.
Well, if you look at in the United States, you have the young boys and girls. Now, I don't know for sure, but I get the perception that you have the young girls going out for soccer, the young boys going out for soccer. No difference. Then as you begin to filter up at the high school and college, something happens. And there's a greater emphasis on perhaps the boys, at least on the professional level. You're talking about making money, and on the professional level, the interest is, it shifts almost exclusively to boys.
But it doesn't. It's not
completely, but mostly.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's what I'm getting at, though, with this whole legacy thing. A lot of guys who love baseball might have played baseball in junior high school or at recess or what have you, when it was always acceptable to. But what we're getting to now is a population post Title IX that, perfect example. I've got a buddy with 3 girls who play softball, and at least one of them, I bet you anything, I'd bet hard cash, is going to get a scholarship to a school because of her ability in the sport. That's huge. And without Title IX, forget it, right? That's not a scholarship that this girl gets to go to college. This is not a skill that she gets to exercise and participate in. And if there is a cable channel showing a female softball championship right now, damn right she's watching it. Absolutely, she's going to want to watch this and hang on every pitch, hit, run, steal, what have you, right? And as more of our girls come up through a system where they're involved in sport, where they recognize who the champions amongst them are by name, the more that at a professional level, it will gain prominence, advertising dollars, the rest of it. Look, football players. When I was a kid, when top player maybe made $500,000. You know what I mean? and was doing car commercials at the local car dealership, right? I mean, they weren't making multi-million-dollar contracts there and there wasn't multi-million-dollar advertising behind it. Even in men's sports, the professional level that we're used to today took a long time to build and develop, and it failed. It failed many times. There's professional football leagues that came and went. And then there were two that were vying that combined to create the National Football League. You know, it's the American Football League, whatever. There was NFC, AFC, but they were different, completely different run organizations that had football teams playing local scrimmages, where people, a lot of the players in the origins of football, they really might not even got paid anything. You know, it was this thing they did like a hobby or for fun, and then it would become televised, and then it became a tradition at a household to watch this game, and that's how you get the rest of the family interested in it. And I like Vikings, and I think a dolphin is a beautiful animal, so I'm going to be for that team, or whatever people latched on to teams, if it wasn't just because of the region that they were raised in. So I think that attention is historical in its significance, but going forward could be more equitable.
And I have an announcement from the chat room, who's obviously not paying any attention to us. SpaceX has landed. So hooray for SpaceX. Gonna drift it. I got two stories about politics.
Uh-oh. And this is usually the stuff I love to talk about the most, but Ed, I gotta go. SpaceX has landed. I'm not even suited. I'm actually out here on the moon without a spacesuit, which is already dangerous enough.
Who's going to be Hillary Clinton's vice president? Who's going to be Trump's vice president?
Great questions. Trump says he's looking for a political insider, but he's the kiss of death because he's going to lose. And Ed, you know, I predicted before the first primary that Trump was going to be the candidate, right? And actually, I think it's going to be a much closer, tougher race than people realize. But what brings him down isn't his isn't him versus Hillary. What's going to bring Trump down is the Republican Party is so fractured on this. The Republican Party isn't a national party in terms of winning a general election. They have Congress is their main stage. Winning lots and lots of rural, small population contests that add up to power and influence in Washington is where they're at. And somebody like Trump actually destabilizes that because they have built a system that is running on fear of a Democratic boogeyman. And they did it under Clinton. They grew again under Obama. And when they have a Republican, they actually diminish. They fell to pieces as Bush was their president. A little while after Obama took place, they got the fear factor working again. And they grew in numbers. I feel like they didn't intend. I think they might have actually wanted Jeb Bush. They might have actually wanted him. He might have been okay to maintain some sort of a thing. But once the few money paid candidates were out of there, the rest of the candidates were a joke. They weren't. None of them were meant to win. None of them were meant to go very far. Bobby Jindal's on the ticket. Santorum again. Rick Perry. Oops, I did it again. Right? Forget it. These were none of these were serious candidates. So I don't actually believe they had any hopes or desires. They oh yeah, we'll support you, Ted Cruz, all the way. The Republican Party hates Ted Cruz. He keeps obstructing regular Republican business as well as anything else. They hate him. Of course they'll support him run for president. They want whoever it is to lose, fall on their sword, and get the hell out of the way.
Okay, Hillary Clinton's choice. Would she? A lot of people. Sanders doesn't want to be the vice president. Okay. A lot of people are talking about Elizabeth Warren. Would Clinton, if she were to consider Warren, want 2 women to be on the ticket in this day and age? Would that make any difference?
I think so. I think it would be great. That would be a great choice. It would bring in a huge part of that Bernie base that, despite Bernie wanting them to vote for her, wouldn't. I think it would bring in a big part of that. And this is something I like. If I was running Bernie's campaign, I would have really gone and been sweet talking Elizabeth Warren to get her to run with him and announce VP candidate, like, before South Carolina. Like, get on board. You'll be the VP candidate. And this is what I kept saying. He's, was my predictive vice presidential pick for him. But if he had done that, I think we'd be talking about Hillary Clinton trying to catch up, or banking on super delegates to get the rest of the way. And I think, and if Biden got in, same sort of thing.
Okay.
The problem is, though, I think Hillary. I think that's the wise choice. I think Hillary is much more conservative than that. I think we're going to find another political centrist. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she offered it to Biden just to keep things as unchanged, and we're going to do exactly the same course without deviating at all. You voted for this guy as vice president. Let's do it. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Biden was actually the vice president for another 4 years. Wouldn't that be great? Vice president for
a career vice president.
12, 16 years. Why not?
Got the experience, right?
He knows the job, right? He has the experience. And Clinton really does have she really does have the experience too.
I'll let you go, but one point
I've heard her talk. She may be. She's had different views on so many different issues at this point that I think she's. That's why not that many Democrats ran. If you notice, they were 17 on the other side. It was like 4 people ran on the 5 maybe ran on the Democratic side in the primaries. It's because Hillary filled out the positions that would have been held by another 12 candidates. He's had so many different issues. It's like you're getting 12 candidates in one just right there. We didn't have to have a big primary race. We had Hillary. We have all these issues covered on both sides and sometimes on 3 sides of the same issue. So, yeah, I got to go ahead.
Okay. See you next week, baby.
Fine. I'll see you next week.
Bye, chat room. You guys have been watching the Space Etch thing, so it landed. All right. Goodbye, everybody.